Here we're going to be looking at how we go about logging into Microsoft Intune, what it is, and an overview of its interface. Here we're going to cover how you go about logging into the Microsoft Endpoint portal. You should have signed up for a Microsoft free trial, which we explained in the video earlier. To do so, what you need to do is navigate to the bottom left corner, just get any browser. My preference is Google Chrome. And then I'm going to navigate to the website office.com, sign into my account, put in my credentials. And then I'm going to go to the admin portal, just open up a new tab. And then I'm going to go to show all, and you should have Endpoint Manager there. I've pinned it for easy access. Here I was going to do a quick introduction and an overview of the Intune Admin Center. So it's a solution from Microsoft, and it's there to manage corporate devices primarily on the cloud, but now also covers on-premise and virtual devices, essentially a device that is connected to the internet. It also has two main methods used across organizations, varying from the mobile device management MDM, which primarily manages the device in its entirety, or most popular now is mobile application management MAM, which primarily looks after the applications that are on that device. It regulates mobile devices that have access to the corporate network and manages identities, apps, and devices. It includes a whole array of features such as remote workers, web-based administrators, the VPN and Microsoft Tunnel, Zero Trust, endpoint security, managing Google Play, Apple tokens, TeamViewer, and mobile threat services. It integrates with Configuration Manager, Windows Autopilot, the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Windows Auto Patch Endpoint Analytics, Microsoft 365 Reporting and Data, and Self-Service. Here we'll do an overview of the Microsoft Intune Admin Center portal. Now this has 11 different topics on the left-hand pane, and we'll run through them one by one. Firstly, the home page, which is basically a welcome to the fresh look for Intune. It's essentially a welcome page with a high-level overview of statistics. It includes things such as device not in compliance, configuration policies with error or conflict, and the client app install feature. It does have a spotlight feature outlining topics of interest, as well as how to maximize and get the most out of your Intunes, as well as Intune customer success. Moving over to the second tab, the dashboard. Now the dashboard will have, again, vital statistics around your device enrollment, device compliance, device configuration, and client apps. It also looks at, all your Intune enrolled devices, as well as your device compliance status as well. Moving over to the third tab, which is all services. This has a number of different services from the apps, devices, endpoint security groups, surface management portal, the tenant administration, which is kind of like over here anyway, as well as your troubleshooting and support and users. Some of these you may find on the left-hand pane, but they are there for easy access. You can search for the services as well where applicable. Moving over to devices, which is a big section. Essentially, you can filter it based on the devices managed by a platform, be it on Windows, iOS, macOS, Android, and Linux. You have a device onboarding section as well related to Windows 365 as well as your enrollment, and more around how to manage the devices. The main ones that you commonly would run through are your configuration, your compliance, conditional access, as well as your group policy analytics. There are a whole host of other factors that you can look at, but there's just more of a high-level overview. Moving over to our fifth tab, which is the apps. Again, this is where you can control your access to certain apps based on the platforms. It also will cover policies around the app policy protection, configuration, as well as wiping apps. Again, a whole host of other sections here as well. On our sixth tab, the endpoint security is a big section with where you can enable and configure and deploy Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to prevent security breaches and gain visibility into your organization's security posture. So on the left-hand pane, you have a number of different sections you can manage. These include the antivirus, disk encryption, firewall, endpoint privilege management, endpoint detection and response, app control for business preview, the attack surface reduction, account protection, device compliance, and conditional access. You can monitor assignment failures as well as your Microsoft Defender for Endpoint here as well. Moving to our next section, which is reports. This has reports on device management, your endpoint security analytics for your endpoints, as well as the Intune data warehouse and Azure monitor. Essentially, it's where you can use Intune to report to monitor endpoint compliance, health, and trends in your organization. Our next section is around users, which is related to Entra ID, essentially where our old Active Directory is now rebranded as Entra ID, and this includes things such as all your users, the audit logs, sign-in logs, diagnose and solve problems, as well as your deleted users, your password resets, and your user settings and bulk operation settings. We also have groups, part of the Microsoft Entra ID, otherwise known as the Azure Active Directory. Again, it's where we would traditionally put security groups in to apply policies to entities so that they can take its effect. We also have tenant administration, where we can essentially administer our tenant. In my example, I've got VeryIT365, and there's a whole host of ways that you can manage it, from the Cloud PKI to audit logs to multi-admin approval, customization, and more. And lastly, we have the troubleshooting and support. This is where we have guided scenarios from Microsoft, where it can essentially assist you with step-by-step guidance, how you go about troubleshooting if you want to search for a certain user in question, and lastly, help and support if you need to reach out to Microsoft support. Here we're going to cover three main topics. Firstly, how you go about creating the group. Secondly, how you created the deployment profile. And lastly, how you go about setting up the automatic enrollment. We'll now create a group. What we'll have to do in the Microsoft Intune Admin Center is go to All Services and select Groups. Over here, we're now going to create a new group. And we'll run through the wizard over here. Firstly, it will be a security group, because this is the only group that does allow it to contain devices. We'll name the group as well, so we're going to be calling it Autopilot Managed Group. Description will be Autopilot Managed Group. And then, can Microsoft Entra roles be assigned to the group? We'll just say yes for now, so it should say no. And we'll also select the dynamic device. The reason being, we don't want to be manually adding each of these device IDs. We wanted to dynamically add that as well. Once we've done so, we'll then add a dynamic query over here. Now, in order to add a dynamic query, one of the things you can refer to is this guide over here, which is on the Microsoft portal. Essentially, it's how to add the device IDs and device groups for Windows Autopilot. So if you scroll down, there is this over here, which we'll need to add in. So just copy that in here. Let's make sure we input that in properly in our syntax. So here, what we're going to do is add an expression. So we're going to edit it, sorry, here. We're going to add this and make sure there's no errors. Click on OK. And we'll save that now. We'll also remove this one here. We'll select save and we'll create that. You can now see if we were to refresh, should have a group called Autopilot Managed Group. And it's a dynamic security group as well. Here we'll now create a deployment profile. What we'll need to do is to navigate over to the enrolled devices at the beginning, on intune.microsoft.com, go to enrollment and deployment profiles. We'll create a profile and we'll call it the Windows PC. We'll use a Windows PC one. And we're now going to run through a wizard of 4 steps. The name of the deployment profile we're going to select is going to be, we'll name it Autopilot Demo Profile. And we're going to convert all targeted devices to autopilot in this scenario. This will essentially mean, if we just read it, so when you select yes to register all target devices to autopilot if they're not already registered, the next time devices go through the Windows out-of-box experience, they'll go through the assigned autopilot scenario. Please note that certain autopilot scenarios require specific minimum builds of Windows. Please make sure that the device has required minimum builds to go through the scenario. Removing the profile won't remove affected devices from autopilot. To remove a device from autopilot, use the Windows autopilot devices view. In this scenario, given we only got like one device, either or won't really make too much of a difference. But here, I'm just going to select yes for now. But essentially, we have to bear in mind is that it won't really affect our device unless we've effectively had to prompt it to be reset and go through the out-of-box experience. Moving over to our second tab, the out-of-box experience. Essentially, what we want to select is for the deployment mode to be user-driven. That way, the user does have a little bit more better control for the out-of-box experience. If we select self-deploying, a lot of the options are grayed out, which we can't really configure. So we're going to select user-driven. And now, in terms of joining to Microsoft Entra ID, we're going to have it Microsoft Entra joined, otherwise known as Azure AD, back a while back before it got rebranded. For the Microsoft software license terms, it's best to show this, given that you don't want to essentially accept the software license terms on behalf of the user. They've got to have the option to review that themselves. That's also applicable for the privacy view. For hide change account options, we want to basically hide that so it prevents them from enrolling themselves as an admin. User account type, we're just going to select standard for now. And in relation to we'll put administrator, given that we've also got, just select what this option is. Put administrator just to be on the safe side, but normally in an environment I would put it as a standard in a live one. Allowed pre-provision deployment. So what this will essentially do is, in autopilot, it doesn't necessarily wipe everything and retain certain settings and applications. We're just going to select no for now, given that we don't need to be too concerned with the applications that are on there. The language, we're just going to pick the operating system default, give the user the option to select it. Automatically configure the keyboard, just select yes for now. And apply device name, we'll say yes. And what we're going to do for our naming convention, given that we've already got in Hyper-V UK -CL11, we're just going to pick UK-CLA. So we got a space bar at the end of it. Bear in mind, what you can also do if you wish to is instead of adding A, you could potentially just add this. And what this will essentially do is add a randomly generated number at the end of your naming convention, should you wish to do so. So this one, for example, had 6 digits at the end of it. But given that I only have one device, we're just going to leave it as that for now. Go to next. And in relation to the assignment groups, we're going to add the group we created earlier, and that was the Autopilot Managed groups. If I were to search for it, Autopilot Manage Group. So we're going to apply the group to our deployment profile. Select. Go to Next. And just bear in mind as well, you do have excluded groups. And what you got to bear in mind with excluded group is that will override an included group. So say, for example, a device is part of an included group and an excluded group, the device would essentially be excluded because exclusion overrides inclusion. But here we're not going to really go too much more beyond that. So once you're happy, just review all your settings just to make sure they are as required. And then when you are okay to proceed, then you just select create for the deployment profile. So if we were now to go back into our devices, enroll device, and go to our deployment profiles, we should now see we do have an autopilot demo profile and with all relevant details there. Back on our devices, we'll now need to go over to our enrollment and automatic enrollment and make sure that our MDM user scope is selected to all, and then click on save. Here, we'll show you how you go about creating the enrollment status page, otherwise known as ESP. We will now update our enrollment status page. To do so, you'll need to navigate to Devices, Enrollment, and Enrollment Status page. Now, the enrollment status page appears during the initial device setup and during the first user sign-in. If enabled, users can see the configuration process of assigned apps and profiles targeted to their device. So if we were to, what you can do is two things: either leave it as it is within the default settings. If we were to drill down into the default settings, look at the properties. Essentially, there's not much that's been configured. It says this is a default enrollment status page screen configured to apply with the lowest priority to all users and all devices regardless of group membership. So it's the default one. If you look at the settings, a lot of it doesn't show any of the progress of the applications that are installing. So you could essentially update this default one over here by simply selecting yes to each of them. So it can show a number of things, such as when it shows an error, depending on how long it takes for the enrollment to take place, show a custom message when the time limit is reached, turn on log collection and diagnostic page for end users, only show page to devices provisioned by out-of-box experience, block the use until all apps and profiles installed, allow users to reset device if installation error occurs, allow users to use the device if installation error occurs, and then block device use until required apps are installed if they are assigned to the user device. So what we're going to do is just press cancel for now. I'm just going to just select no for now, leave it as it was. Just going to cancel. And what we are going to do instead is, if we go back into the devices, enrollment, we'll return back to it again, enrollment status page. This time we're going to create one and we will call it UK-CL11 ESP. Note, outlining it is the enrollment status page. Just click on yes, next. We'll now show the apps and profile configuration, and in each of them we'll just select yes. Apart from that, go to next. And then we need to add the respective group. As before, we'll add the Autopilot Managed group from earlier. Select. Go to next. In relation to the scope, for the administrators that we don't need to be involved at this stage. So just leave it as default and select next. And then you can just review all your settings. And if you're happy with that, then just select activate. Now, as you can see, it has different priorities over here. And what you can do is, if you wish to, and you've created another one, you can modify the priorities the number one being a higher priority, so that would essentially override the default priority. Here, we'll now show a live Windows deployment by using Autopilot. So in summary, we've created the groups. So if we were to go to groups, we can see that we've got our Autopilot managed group over here. Secondly, we've created a deployment profile. Go back to devices, enrollment, and deployment profiles. You can see we've got our Autopilot demo profile as well. We've also created our automatic enrollment. So if we were to go back into devices, enroll devices, and go into automatic enrollment, you can see that our MDM user scope is all. Furthermore, if we go into our enrollment status page, going back to devices, enrollment status page, you can see that our enrollment status page is currently around here as well. So with that all being said, and also if we were to lastly go into our devices, enrollment, devices, we can see that our serial number has registered on the Intune Admin Center as well. With all this in place, and also if we were lastly to go over to our users as well in Office 365 Admin Portal, see our active users, look at PM, we can see on a license perspective that that user does have the Microsoft 365 E5, the Microsoft 365 E3, as well as a Windows 10 11 Enterprise E3 as well. So with that all in place, what we'll do now is to actually run through the out-of-box experience and to initiate the Autopilot out-of-box experience provision. To do so, we're going to minimize the screen. You can see our device is also up to date as well, and it's connected to the internet. And also, if we go over to our network and settings, Ethernet, we can see that it's pointing to our DNS 192.1. If we go to here, it's pointing to 192.168.0.62. If we were to go over to our server 2022 and make sure we've got the same one, got 192.168.0.62. Just make sure it can also ping it as well to make sure all our prerequisites are in place. It's also got automatic IP assignment, and just make sure it can ping it as well. .62. Yep. Great. So with all this in place, meeting all the relevant requirements, we'll now initiate the sysprep. So we're going to trigger it off the out-of-box experience. To do so, if you right-click on this, select Run, and we're going to search for sysprep. And as you can see, from the drop-down, we're going to select sysprep OOBE, which is the out-of-box experience, and also for it to reboot. Now, bear in mind, this is going to take some time, so we'll have to pause it midway through, but we'll speed it up. We'll resume recording and the session as and when the important bits do come up. So it's now checking for the updates. Accept the license agreement. We're going to sign in with our credentials. Now put in our password. Ask for it later for now. Let's set up the device. Okay, now it's going to run through the device preparation, device setup, and account setup. And the good thing as well, it should hopefully give a live progress update on each section of this. Yeah, we're just going to select no, accept, no, required only, no, no, no. Let it now run through the out-of-box experience here. So if we were to now sign in, it's working on the account setup. So it's asking, use Windows Hello with your account. Your organization requires you to set your work or school account with Windows Hello Face, fingerprint, or PIN. If you already set Windows Hello on this device, will automatically add it to your account. You may ask to be re-verify it with Windows 11. If your organization requires a more complex PIN, Windows will prompt you to change it. Click on OK. Let's go to next. Try a different method, otherwise I'll do the authenticator app. Do my phone for now. Enter my mobile number for now. Okay, verification complete. Your phone's been registered. Go next. Done. Okay, so if we were to now go over to our start button, search for settings, and within here, you look for work or school. You can see it's connected to Very IT's Entra ID. Now, bear in mind, we've not connected it to the domain specifically. It's only just purely for it to be connected to our Entra ID, or what you know as Azure ID previously. Furthermore, if we were to navigate back to our admin portal, and we go to our admin, show all, endpoint manager, go to our devices, go to our enrollment, go to devices, sorry, go to Windows. You can now see that the UK-CL11 is managed by Intune and is compliant. Furthermore, if we were to go into the devices, enrolled devices, enrollment, go to our deployment profile, Autopilot demo profile, look at assigned devices, you can now see that our serial number, which is now in the Microsoft Intune Admin Center. Here, I've made a list of troubleshooting steps that you can follow if you are running through a Windows Autopilot deployment. We'll now run through the troubleshooting steps you should do if you come across a Microsoft Intune deployment autopilot failure. So the first thing is to check during the enrollment that there are no error messages appearing during that enrollment status page for the out-of-box experience. If you do get an error message, then do Google that and see what it points out to. Also, in relation to your enrollment status page, just make sure that you also have that it's enabled on your settings in the portal. So, for example, if we were to go back into our admin portal over here through intune.microsoft.com, we were to go to devices, go to enrollment and the enrollment status page. You can then check the enrollment status page that we created earlier, check the properties, and make sure that the progress is being showed and any error messages do display where applicable. Going back to our second point is a network connectivity. Just make sure the device, that your Windows 11 device, does have internet connectivity, be it through Wi-Fi or LAN. So going back to our device again and over here, as an example, just make sure that the internet is connected. Furthermore, if we were to go over to our settings, network and internet, just make sure that it is connected. It has a valid IP address that you can ping, the website. You can ping the DNS server. So, for instance, this one here was set manually to 192.168.0.62. So, for instance, if I were to now go back to my virtual machine and go into CMD and check the IP config, just make sure that that IP address for DNS is set over into the VM over here as required, and make sure it does have a valid IP address. You can also try updating any network adapt drivers where applicable, and make sure your Windows is updated as well. In relation to the Windows Autopilot profile, just make sure it has downloaded. So just make sure that you do have a registered device ID and that the device is associated with a deployment profile and a group, and that the user has a relevant license and managed to sign in successfully during the out-of-box experience. So taking those 3 points, for instance, we would now go back into our admin portal over here. Do make sure that your device is registered on the portal. So if we go to device, enrollment, and go back into Windows Autopilot devices, and you can see that we had the serial number there, which we ran the script for. Furthermore, make sure that you do have a deployment profile. So going back into our devices, enrollment, and our deployment profile, that we do have a deployment profile. And within that deployment profile as well, we do have a group, that Autopilot Managed group. So if we were to go into our all services, groups, and you can see we have an Autopilot Managed group. Furthermore, within there, we can check the members just to make sure that that device is registered into Intunes. Furthermore, what we should generally do as well is make sure that that user, when it does prompt them to sign in during the out-of-box experience, does have the relevant licenses. So, for instance, if I were to go to that PM one over here, you can see that the relevant licenses are in place in order to enroll via Intunes as well. Going back to our slide, and make sure that the device is joined onto Entra ID, and if we have enabled Autopilot as well. So going back over here, by that what I mean is, if we did see earlier that the device was registered via the Azure portal, but furthermore, if we want to check from the device itself specifically, we would need to go over to our settings. Go into About, the very bottom. Sorry, supposed to go into Work. My apologies. Access Work or School, and you can see it says connected to Very IT's Entra ID, and you can also see that is the case when we do go over back to our portal. So if we were to go back into our admin center for Intune Admin Center, go in devices, check our devices, and we can see that that device is compliant and it does have the relevant license in place and is managed by Intune as well. Furthermore, in the event, if we were to go back to our slide, just make sure that, if you are getting any issues within the out-of-box experience and you need to restart it, if you find it's not progressing anywhere, do press Shift F10 to launch a command line prompt, and thereby you can run a couple of scripts, or command line, sorry. You've got the shutdown.exe /r/t0, and that is to restart your device. You also have the shutdown.exe /s/t0, and that is to shut down the device. And thereby you can, reinitiate the out-of-box experience. And that concludes this session.